something I struggle with, even after all these years of having a market garden, and I say struggle with, it's always a question in my mind, is how much I water. But if I use these three principles as I come out here to my market garden every week, then it simplifies it. If I just think about these things in my mind, it makes watering so much easier. And those of you who have been gardening for a long time, you probably have a good idea in your area how much water you put in your garden each week. So I'm going to give you three simple principles that'll show you exactly when and how to water. And I think it's Apple that uses this phrase, Apple with our iPhones, as they say, it's intuitive. In other words, if you ever open up your iPhone box, you've ever had that experience, I'm getting my brand new phone, there's really no instructions. They're used to, those of us who started off with iPhones, or excuse me, started off with cell phones a long time ago, there was this big instruction book. This is how you add a contact, here's how you delete it, here's how you put a favorite number in. There was a book that thick that would come with cell phones. Now you just get an iPhone, you unbox it, and it's just intuitive. You know how to do it. That's what we're going to do today with the water. We're going to make this intuitive. So here are the three things I'm going to walk you through on how to know when you need to water your garden and water your plants and make it specific for each plant. The first one is, where do you live? And what I mean by that is you may live in the Northeast where it is cooler and a lot more rain. You may live in Phoenix, Arizona, and I've seen there's a very large market garden. I'm not sure where it's at. It's pretty close to downtown Phoenix. I may be wrong on that, but I've seen it online. And I guarantee you, they are hotter and have more evaporation. So they're dealing with a situation where they have to water more frequently. And you may live in somewhere in Georgia where your rainfall, I don't know what, I'm guessing your rainfall is probably over 60 inches a year. We're right here in Central Texas. Some years we'll have in the lower 20s. Some years we will have upwards of 40. But this area right here in the Texas Hill Country can have its aridness. Not like West Texas, but it can have a period of droughts and aridness and a lot of heat. So I've really got to watch the levels of watering and watch my plants and adjust accordingly. So number one, where do you live? And think about those situations. Humidity may be higher, humidity may be lower in the Southwest. So just think about that. And you may be, let's say you live in Michigan where the temperatures are colder and there's just going to be less evaporation because of the temperature. There's number one. Number two, within that area where you live, what is the weather? And I'm going to give you an example of my year this past year. Typically July and August are one of our most brutal months here in central South Texas. We have the highest heat, we have some of the lowest humidities, and it's brutal. Plants have got to have, and that's why if you look right over there, you can see that shade cloth that we use here because we have a lot of intense sun and we're trying to keep the plants from wilting and being too hot in that direct sun setting. So what's the weather like within the area where you live? And if you go back to this past July, here in Central Texas, which should have been a hot, dry month, was the complete opposite. We had one of the wettest periods I can remember for July in years. We had a flooding situation in this area. There was a lot of tragedy actually associated with it. It was terrible. But there was a whole lot of rain and a whole lot of clouds, and my outside things, if you look across this south part, some of this stuff has already gone to sleep because we've had our first frost, so it's pretty much done. But this outside things just didn't need a lot of water because we had an unusual amount of rain and humidity. Even these high tunnels took less water because of the weather. So the second thing, depending, first, where do you live? What are the needs in that area? Dry or wet area, and then within those areas there can be a microclimate that can be different. You can have years in Atlanta, Georgia, which typically is a pretty heavy rain area, that it can be a drought season, and you're going to have to stay on top of making sure your plants have the right amount of water in that drought season. So that's number two. And number three, this is pretty intuitive, but sometimes you don't think of it. You just think of all of your crops as exactly the same. But there's those things that are large, those things that take more water. For example, the first thing that comes to my mind is cucumbers. We trellis our cucumbers in here. They go up, they have a lot of cucumbers hanging on them, and they're going to require, those cucumbers are just by the nature of the fruit of it, it's going to require more water. Tomatoes are another one. Okra. Okra is great in the hot time of the year, but that is a big plant and it's going to require more water. Now, if it's green beans, or maybe it's, gosh, I'm trying to think of something, your bunch onions, that's a smaller thing, maybe a little bit less water. It's going to need a frequency there to keep the water, to keep life. All living things need that moisture. So that's a thing to consider, that particular plant. And I always say, do your research. We live in this age when everything's at our fingertips on your smartphone. Go into your search engine, how much water is required for plug in the plant, and usually you'll get a pretty good answer. I don't trust everything on some of these search engines because they'll kind of generalize, but it'll give you a good idea. And I'm all about making things as simple as possible in your garden setting. So those are the three things it boils down to. Where do you live? What's the weather within that area where you live? Could be in a drought, could be in a wet season. And then what's the particular plant that you're watering? So now we've got those three intuitive things down. Think about where, weather, the plant. And then the last thing is, how am I going to water them? And that's a pretty easy solution. Here at Whirlwind Family Farm, we love drip lines. You can see this is an area where this is now, we don't have a lot planted right here. There's going to be some things planted soon, but we use drip lines. We like drip lines because it's not, no water is being applied, first of all, to the leaves. We deal with powdery mildew. Putting water on the leaves sometimes contributes to powdery mildew. That's an issue we don't like to deal with. In more arid areas, like we're talking about in the Southwest, Phoenix, Nevada, maybe those areas, maybe you can top water and not have a lot of issues with powdery mildew. And then we like the fact of a drip line or drip tape because you're putting water exactly where that root system is for that plant. It's going directly to it. And if you top water with a big sprinkler, you're broadcasting water everywhere, the rows, the sides, and then you start watering weeds and encouraging weeds. So, and also drip lines, drip tape uses considerably less water than an overhead watering system. But that's your choice, depending on where you live. You can also hand water. If it's a small garden, you just have your little watering can. You can go out and water when need be. It's not a big garden, doesn't take a lot of time. Soaker hoses, set on a timer. And you got to be careful with timers because they may be going off while it's raining. I've seen that happen before. So you got to stay on top of your timers. And also timers, I'll say they're great, but they don't go out and do the legwork of knowing the weather, where you live, all those factors. It's better than not watering at all, but you can do soaker hoses, overhead broadcast, or drip lines like we do. So those are options on how to water. And I'll give you one more caution, and I've told this story many times. When we started out on this Whirlwind Family Farm, is inside these high tunnels, we had Swiss chard, beautiful Swiss chard. Started off great, like blockbuster, gangbusters, just looked fantastic. And then after about 2 or 3 weeks, it started wilting and getting brown. And I was like, do I have some sort of fungus? I didn't see any powdery mildew. Like, what is going on? And what was going on is I was loving them to death. I came out, gave them water, next day gave them water, and I was flooding the roots. So you can overwater, cut oxygen off from the root system, and they'll start to die. So my recommendation is, it's better just to have the right amount of water, even a little bit less, and plants will let you know when they don't have enough water. They'll start to wilt. You'll start to see the signs that they're not doing well. So be cautious of overwatering. That can be just as bad as underwatering. And now I'm going to give you the final tip on when to know when to water. And there's one surefire method, and that's walk out into your garden each day. Take your finger, take your hand, depending on how soft the soil is, get your hand, your finger down 3, 4, 5 inches as deep as you can go and see what you feel. If it feels good and moist and there's plenty of moisture there in that soil, don't water. You know that that root system is getting plenty of moisture and you're good. Wait the next day and check it again. And I will tell you that that's a lesson I had to learn. And I'll tell you, I'll give Charles Dowding, the great Charles Dowding, he's in Great Britain. I'll give him credit for this. He is in Great Britain, which is, let's think about it, it is a cooler climate. It's further north. They get a lot more rain, a lot more humidity. And he was talking in one of his videos how in one of his polytunnels, he hadn't watered in a month. And I had to rewind that and say, did he say a month? Simply because he would go in, check, plenty of moisture there. He didn't need to add water. He was going to not make the mistake I did of overwatering my Swiss chard and killing it. But he had all the factors, cooler weather, plenty of humidity. But it was a polytunnel, so he had to water manually inside, but he knew he didn't have to add any water to it. So that's where getting your finger down the soil is really going to be helpful and let you know. So I hope that helps. It's a simple thing. It's intuitive, and it'll help you know when to water. Keep those three factors. Like I said, where do you live? What's the weather in that area where you live of that time? Because it can change from year to year. Some years can be a little wetter, a little drier. And what's the plant? And then go out and put your finger in, test it, then you know when to water. So I hope that helps. Thanks for finding our channel. I'm Jeff with Whirlwind Family Farm. We're here in Central Texas, Zone 8, which is a warmer zone. And we appreciate your time. And it means a lot to Whirlwind Family Farm when you like, subscribe, and certainly hit that bell for notification. And give us your comments. What are your thoughts on watering, how you do it, when you do it? Maybe you look at it a little bit different than I do. And that's fine. We don't have all the answers. Thanks again. Blessings over you, your family, and your garden. Talk to you soon from Whirlwind Family Farm.